Hi, my name is Scott Gibson with Beneath the Surface. I'm here with Eric Coffin, hard rock analyst, and Jeff Wilson, president of Precipitate Gold. Thanks for being with us, guys.
Thanks, Scott.
Eric, can you tell us a little bit about where we are right now and the kind of companies and areas that you're looking at?
We're coming out of a pretty brutal bear market. I think we're entering a new bull market, but it's going to take time. It's going to be slow and hesitant. You can see money gravitating to companies, and it's a small number of them, where investors are comfortable these guys will be able to build something that's actually going to make money, lowest quartile cost. The other type of company that's starting to get attention again selectively, is exploration companies, because the great thing about discovery stories is it doesn't really matter which part of the market you're in. If somebody makes a discovery, the market glums onto it.
And that sort of leads us to where we are today in terms of doing something a little different here with Beneath the Surface, having Jeff Wilson, the president of Precipitate, with us. What is it about Precipitate that has attracted you to that company?
Well, Precipitate's got a project in the Dominican Republic, and I've followed that country for a long time. I'm probably the longest term follower, I suppose, of Gold Quest. I've always really liked the belt of rocks that Precipitate's in. I mean, in a way, it's sort of gold. You could say the Terreo belt is Gold Quest discovery. I mean, it really is. They were the ones that went in there initially and did the first exploration. About 18 months ago, they made a discovery called Romero. They should be putting out a PEA fairly soon, but it's impressive if you look at that discovery and realize that in 18 months they went from 0 to over 3 million ounces equivalent. Their finding cost is probably $5 or $6 maybe, and it's a very nice looking deposit. And that belt in its entirety has had very little exploration on it. Really, Gold Quest were the first ones in there, and a lot of the ground, including the ground Precipitate holds, has really never seen any substantial work. And it seems to me to be an area where relatively light expenditures give you a chance for a big find. And a big find and a big move in the share price, as we saw. Yeah, Gold Quest was a 5-cent stock. We continue to follow it, partially because there was a small discovery close to this new one that we liked. It wasn't big, but it was a nice little deposit. And they have another discovery that's in the next belt to the east. They went from being a 5-cent stock to a $2 stock in about, what, 2 months maybe? Mm-hmm. When Romero started spitting out drill holes, they were very, very impressive. And the resource they ended up with, it shows you how fast that was. I mean, it doesn't actually have that many holes in it, but they already have over 2 million ounces.
And I'm a large shareholder of Precipitate. I'm obviously biased, but can you tell us why you think there's the similarities there and why you like it?
I'm biased too, of course, as a shareholder, but I was really happy to see them go in there, because they went in, they got ground adjacent to Gold Quest. They're covering the same rocks, the Terreo volcanic belt. That's where all the discoveries are being made. Gold Quest does have actually a couple of pretty interesting things down at that end of their holdings. There are a couple of Gold Quest discoveries pretty close to where Precipitate's located right now. They went in last year, did a very small program, and quite quickly came up with 3 or 4 showings. The principal one is called Ginger Ridge, and really just with a few days of mapping and some soil and silt samples, they immediately had something that was worth focusing on.
And that's a good point to transition over to you, Jeff. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the work that you've done in Dominican Republic with Precipitate and how things are going for you?
Yeah, no, as Eric alluded to, starting out here, this was essentially ground that was located next to Gold Quest. They had made that discovery, and obviously the area was heating up. And so admittedly, this was largely an area play that we moved into, but very quickly we'd advanced that to some showings, prospective showings. We delineated in on those that we thought were the most prospective. As Eric alluded to, Ginger Ridge was the one that stood out the most to us. So we did what I would consider to be very simple, straightforward, systematic exploration. We went in, we did soils and geochemistry. We delineated an anomalous area of gold and silver that measured about 1,000 meters by about 400 meters. We did some trenching. We delineated a mineralized trench, 13 meters of 1.5 grams. open at both ends. We were delayed a little bit in waiting for some necessary paperwork to come through and permitting from the Dominican government. You know, in retrospect, that time in the market was pretty depressed anyway, so maybe it was not a bad thing. We've now got our necessary paperwork and permits, and we're back again with boots on the ground and in the midst currently of some IP work that we hope to utilize as a final exploration tool to delineating drill targets.
And before I touch on the IP, here we are in April of 2014. You had a couple of big news items already this year that have really moved things forward.
Yeah, and the most recent of which is the latest trenching, where we've gone back to that 13-meter trench. Because we were cutting lines for the IP and the ground geophysics, we had crews on site, and we elected to send some of those crew members over to extend the trenches. And we extended what was a 13-meter trench of 1.5 grams to 32 meters of 1 gram. And very consistent mineralization from one end to the other. Again, that remains open strongly to the north for ongoing expansion should we elect to do that. The other catalyst of news that was reported earlier this year was that concession grant and that permitting from the Dominican government. I think the market understood that without that we were restricted in the work that we could do. With that, we now have the full green light to go ahead and move the project forward to a drill program. So we've got some news that's come out in recent weeks. We expect additional news to follow as we've got this IP now underway. And the significance of that IP is that, you know, that really has been a significant tool for others in the region, in that belt of rocks. Again, you're not talking about things where there's rusty outcrops poking out of the ground that tell you exactly where to go. You know, you get these soil anomalies, you maybe get some grab and silt samples, but it's IP for our neighbors and others down the road that has really proven to be the tool for delineating targets. So we're excited to be at that stage.
And can you talk a little bit about the success that GoldQuest had with IP?
Yeah, GoldQuest, when they worked on their property that's sort of adjacent to the north of it, they initially made a discovery called the Scandalosa. It's called Romero South now, and that was a prospecting discovery, much the same way as Ginger Ridge is a prospecting discovery. They sort of drilled that off. It was a small, flat lying, but good grade deposit. You know, 200,000-300,000 ounces, not huge, but nice. They realized they'd probably taken things as far as they could using that methodology, so they went back in and did IP over a broader area. And the discovery they made last year that ultimately became the Romero deposit, that discovery was essentially a blind IP target. They had, I think, the hill that sort of sits above Romero, they had a couple of good silt anomalies, and I think they might have had 1 grab sample, but essentially the actual deposit itself was totally blind. They drilled a chargeability high and just pulled an amazing hole right on the first one. I mean, that was the first hole into that target, and it was impressive. And that's not lost on GoldQuest, even though that project itself is getting quite developed. That little piece of it, they just finished flying an airborne over the entire belt of their holdings, right up and down to the south end, in the middle, sort of where Precipitate is as well. I know that they're waiting to get that report back, but I've talked to them. I know they've got, as the airborne will do, it generate a massive number of targets. They're going to get in ground proof, do more IP on these things up and down the belt, and drill a whole bunch of other things. So, you know, while Precipitate's generating its own news, you know, there's potential discovery news right next door. It's, you know, same rock, same belt, same story.
And what are you hoping to see from the IP in terms of Precipitate, and does that lead to drilling?
I think, given, you know, if it was me, thankfully it's not because I'm not a geologist, but if it was me looking at those trenches, you know, 32 meters in one direction, 15 meters in the other direction, basically sitting on a kilometer-long soil anomaly, I'd probably put drill holes in something like that. I mean, in a hot market, you just drill it right now, really, honestly. But what I think the IP can tell them, I hope, and it's quite important, is how is this sitting? Because all you've really got, there's not a lot of outcrop, as Jeff said, so, you know, you've got this little spot here, little spot there. You don't really have a good sense of the geometry, but hopefully IP should be able to generate chargeability and resistivity anomalies that Mike Moore, their VP Exploration, can look at and say, okay, I can see how this thing is sitting. I know where I need to put the drill to test this thing properly. And I expect, given the description of the surface stuff, I'll be very surprised if it doesn't in fact generate IP anomalies they can deal with. I'm quite confident it will.
Nice.
Yeah, and on those, on that note, in terms of the IP, one of the things that we're quite excited about is, given the location of the project, a lot of times you find these things in remote locations and you're sort of handcuffed by communication problems. Where we are here, we've actually got cell coverage right at camp on the project. So the ability for us to generate this data quickly, virtually immediately, is at hand for us. And so we don't expect there to be a long time lag between this IP work being completed and a reasonable amount of time to assess and evaluate it and be in a position to start to plot up a drill plan.
And do you have enough money to drill?
We do. We're financed to get through this phase of work that we're doing and to get this project to a drill stage. And I think all going well, we would be in a position to be drilling this project within, I would say, comfortably within 3 months, maybe much sooner.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. As a shareholder, I'm very curious to see how this turns out.
Thank you.
Again, that's Eric Coffin with Hard Rock Analyst and Jeff Wilson, President of Precipitate Gold. My name is Scott Gibson with Beneath the Surface. Thanks for being with us.